Welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is, the podcast with conversations with real leaders overcoming real crap. Today's episode was such an amazing experience for me. I was able to have a great conversation with Sandeep Chennakeshu, one of the most brilliant men I think I've ever been able to sit down with and interview. And he was a real tech entrepreneur, pretty much at the helm of all the major inventions that led to us having smartphones, Bluetooth, right? He was technical expert turned CTO, turned entrepreneur, just a really wise leader who has had some really incredible challenges. So I hope you enjoy this episode where Sandeep walks us through some of the multi-billion-dollar challenges he's faced and mistakes he's made, and what he's learned, and some of the guiding principles of leadership that he has cultivated over these many years. Enjoy the conversation. All right, welcome, Sandeep. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. So thank you again for your time and for being here with us.
Thanks, Meg. It's great to be on the show.
So you have an incredibly rich and exciting background, lots of diverse experiences in kind of high stress, fast paced, highly technical environments. I would love for you to share a little bit about your background and some of those big wins that you've had in your career.
Well, thanks. My career started with a love for mathematics, and I decided to pursue a PhD. I came to America. I got my PhD in electrical engineering. And in the early days, I chose to do my PhD in mobile radio. And in the 80s, everyone said I wouldn't get a job because they said, what are you doing mobile radio for? Even a famous consulting company says not even 1 million will be sold in the year 2000. But I believed this was going to be the future. And I continued to do my degree. And I got a great job at GE Corporate Research to build a team and to build the first digital mobile phone testbed. Great experience. 5 of us built a little mini base station and a mobile. And then Ericsson, the Swedish company, the Swedish telecom giant, was very impressed with our research, and they hired my entire group. They bought out my group. And I went on to become head of Ericsson Research. 11 years later, I became their chief technical officer. And then our whole company went through a little trouble, at least the phone division, and we merged with Sony to form Sony Ericsson. I became their first chief technical officer. And it's a very interesting part of my career there because we started off with about 6 or 7 billion in revenue, and we rapidly dropped to 3 billion because we were getting beaten by Nokia.
Okay.
And so we had to come up with a strategy, and I came up with a strategy to build multimedia and smartphones. And the company that was delivering this product was an Ericsson company in Sweden, and they were floundering. So, well, the chairman of Sony and the chairman of Ericsson said, hey, why don't we take this guy and send him to Sweden to go fix it? Because after all, it's his idea to build these multimedia type phones that can take pictures and transmit videos and do all these things. So I went to Sweden, the best 3 years of my career. I actually went, I'm sorry for this noise, it's my phone ringing, but essentially went to Sweden, and we basically turned that company around in 9 months and went on to take 30% market share. And based on the products we were delivering, we got 19 customers around the world, and Sony Ericsson grew from 3 billion to 12 billion. So great success story. And after my 3 years as an expat in Sweden, I came back and I joined a company in America, in Austin, which we sold to private equity after some time, and it was sold for a very large sum. I did my little stint there helping them with operational efficiency. and then went on to start my own consulting business. Very successful little stint for 5 years, where I had five multinational clients. The last client of mine was BlackBerry. BlackBerry was in a spot of trouble, so I was asked to go over. I was hired by the private equity. Sorry, uh, it was actually not private equity, but there was a banker and one of the people on the board who hired me to help address some of their problems. And I helped them to do that, and then went on to run their smaller divisions, which grew very profitably and brought in a lot of cash. And so it was a wonderful stint to actually do these various things. And in the last chapter, I just said I hadn't written a book, so I wrote a book about all my experiences of turnarounds and inventions and everything. And really, the credit goes to my incredible teams because you can't accomplish what I've been able to do without fantastic teams, and the credit goes to them.
It sounds like
And
you, yeah.
finally, I joined a startup. I've been there for 4 years. It's an automotive startup, and it's been a lot of fun.
So it sounds like you went from mathematician to inventor and having these big visions and ability to see what the opportunities were, and then your passion for really building something meaningful to people drove you to keep seeking out these new challenges. And even at this point in your career, where a lot of people would be kicking back and just what's the expression is riding on your coattails, right? I've done all these incredible things. I've got patents. I've had all these executive roles, turned around all these companies to be highly profitable and bringing us a lot of the technology that we use today, Bluetooth, smartphones, right? You're right at the helm of a lot of that, a lot of the technical advances. It sounds like you're really passionate about seeking out those new challenges and new big problems from both a technical and a business side.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. Somebody once asked me, "What's the formula you used?" And there is no formula. I said, "But I have seven beliefs. I've written about this in articles." I said, I grabbed every opportunity I got.
Mhm.
I'm an immigrant in America, and so every opportunity that came my way, I found something good about it and I accepted it. But there are seven beliefs that I have that have been very useful and guided me throughout my career for the last 40 years. And the first one is dream with conviction. And because when everyone told me that there was no future in mobile phones in 1984, I said, no, that's what I'm going to spend my life doing. And I had the conviction to follow it, of course, aided by my professor who said, hey, you're on the right path.
Mhm.
The second thing is uh, always get out of your comfort zone.
Mhm.
So when I was a researcher doing mathematics, I, of course, was very comfortable because, you write a lot of papers, people like it, and you get acknowledgement. But I decided to move into building products. I completely left my position. And it's an interesting thing because you go from being someone who is respected to someone who's not respected. Because in the new group, you're like the runt in the litter. Everyone pushes you over. And so you have to learn and rebuild your toolkit.
Okay.
And you slowly do that. And then you actually become an expert in that area. And then after some time, when you've contributed, you switch again.
Mhm.
And I did that repeatedly to broaden my toolkit to do many more things and move away from just being research or product. So I learned about finance, I learned about
Mhm.
culture, I learned about marketing and sales, I learned about production and operations.
Mhm.
So you go through that entire cycle. The next thing is you have to learn from your successes and failures.
Mhm.
And the school of hard knocks teaches you more than any other school.
Mhm.
Uh, Then the next thing is you have to actually learn to deal with adversity. Adversity, it's a curveball, and you can't let it swallow you. You have a choice. And a professor of mine told me a great story very early in my career. He said, Sandeep, I was very upset over something that happened at work. I thought I should have got credit for something that I didn't. And I was kind of moping, sulking. And, I collaborated with this professor, and he told me, he said, look, you're a guy who has a lot of opportunities. Think of them as sandwiches on a plate. He said, if you had one sandwich on your plate and somebody stole it, you should be very upset. But you have so many sandwiches on your plate. Who cares if somebody took one? What a beautiful way of thinking of things. And I've used that analogy right through my life. The next thing is to get battle tested. There's only so much you can practice. I played cricket, I played a lot of cricket. And there's only so much cricket you can play in the nets, practice or in the batting cage. Ultimately, you've got to play in the field and you've got to score against a top opposition. And another mentor of mine told me, he said, that's like actually making steel because you need to heat it and then you need to beat it and you need to cool it and you need to do that repeatedly. And that's how it becomes steel. So you're forging yourself through these experiences to become strong. I went to a Catholic school and a Jesuit priest, one of my teachers told me, he said, it's your choice to be ignorant or not. So that was great learning for me. So every day, I try to basically find out what's new and I write a journal. I write down little things and anything I'll hear during the day or I read that I don't know, I jot it down and then I go look it up. And I learn from everyone. So being curious helps me evolve. And the last principle is, or belief is, be true to yourself. See, nobody will believe more in you than yourself. So understand that when you are responsible, you have to make decisions. You can listen to everyone. You should listen to everyone and analyze what they say, but you should make the decision and you should live with it because if things go wrong, only you will get blamed. So usually, if you're right, then many people will take credit. but, but so these are the principles I've lived by, and it's been extremely beneficial.
So, Sandeep, are these principles outlined in your book, Your Company is Your Castle?
Yes, it's the last chapter. The
Okay.
7 beliefs are in the last chapter.
So, something that I have found of those truly resilient, high-performing leaders who are able to break through all kinds of adversity is they develop these principles throughout their life or ways of living. It's sort of these rules for living that are going to allow you to truly live out your purpose and have a big impact on the world. And it sounds like you have really cultivated this over the years. And one author to another. I wanna dive into a little straight talk here about adversity. That was what my book is all about, how to hack adversity so that you can gain that wisdom, that strength that only adversity can gives you, right? Like steel and sharpening your sword.
Yeah.
And so I would love to hear if you could give us an example of a really hard thing that you went through, so a major adversity that even you dove into the opportunity and then you went, whoa, I've bitten off a lot, right? This is going to be harder than I thought. Some unexpected things happened. Um, can you describe to us something like that, a big adversity that you've been able to overcome, and what do you think was your secret to being able to do that?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good question because it's something that I struggled with for many years.
Okay.
Very early in my career, I got promoted ridiculously quickly. And I think everyone thought I was technically and operationally astute, but
Hmm.
they didn't realize I didn't have the management experience.
Hmm.
But, they said, bright guy, and just says, promote this guy. He seems to have a lot of good ideas. Well, fortunately, it paid off the first 3 years because I grew the business by 50% every year.
Hmm.
That's enormous. So I went from I grew the business from a small amount of money all the way to 1.5 billion.
Hmm.
And then what happened is I was partnered up with another gentleman, and he was responsible for sales, and I was responsible for everything else. And what happened is we made a lot of bad decisions. We actually over forecasted what the market would be, and we built up a lot of factory capacity, and there was no demand. So we were in a complete mess. So around halfway through the year, I went to my boss and said, "I'm going to lose a heck of a lot of money." And he didn't believe me. He said, and at the end of the year, we lost exactly what I said. And so now, what do you do? Now they didn't want to lose me because because I knew every part of the business and I knew how everything was connected. So
Hmm.
I was still valuable. But and so they came to me, and of course they said, Sandeep, I know you made a mistake, and they were kind of hemming and hawing. And I said, guys, look, I made a mistake. I need to step down, but I'm not going to leave the company. I'd like you to promote someone over me. I'll work for that person. Okay. And I'm going to go clean this mess up.
I love it.
Okay. Because, in a way, I felt responsible,
Mhm.
right? Because I listened to too many opinions. I didn't voice my opinion, even though I knew exactly how much money we were going to lose.
Mhm.
I didn't say anything. I wanted to fit in with the pack,
Mm.
right? And so that was a great learning experience. And the next year, I cleaned up everything, and then they double promoted me. They made me the chief technical officer because they're very grateful. So that entire experience taught me, how that they taught me so many lessons, all the things we did wrong about forecasting, about assessing the market, about how to basically streamline your operations, all of it, right? And it was also a self-realization that I was not a water walker.
Right.
I had some serious flaws that I had to fix.
Yeah.
So that's one story. And I'll tell you one more that was actually for personal growth. So several years later, running a business, uh, you know, um, I used to have this habit of, still have this habit of, after 6 o'clock, I say anyone can come into my office and just chat for as long as they want. Okay. Because during the day, there's too many meetings and things like that. But, in the evening, so um, this older guy came to my office and he said, Sandeep, can I talk to you privately? And he said, what is it? I said, what's it? He said, you know, you're a pretty smart GM. You're always 2 steps ahead. But there's a problem. Have you ever noticed when you're crossing the bridge, how many of your employees are behind you?
Mm.
He said, many a time you're venturing into enemy territory all alone. It
Mhm.
may be good if you took your army along. And it was wow. I said, "Oh my God, that was such good feedback."
Yeah.
And I said, "Wow." I said, "I haven't been explaining my decisions. I
Hmm.
haven't been convincing them to follow me."
Right.
And it is wonderful learning experience. And I think it changed. Over the years, the feedback has helped me change from being, one type of boss to a completely different type of manager.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think a lot of us who are tigers, who are ambitious, sometimes we outrun our punt coverage. That's what one of my mentors said. Meg, you've outrun your punt coverage. You're running out there with the ball like, yeah, come on, guys, we're gonna score, and no one's behind you. You
That's right.
stop to not only explain the strategy and share your vision, but to kind of lasso them in emotionally, make them care as much as you, right? And that was a
Absolutely.
big learning moment for me as well.
Because that's part of actually realizing a vision. If the vision is large enough, you have to explain it to get people to buy in and help you build a plan to achieve it.
Right.
Otherwise, it won't happen.
So, Sandeep, that also leads me to another question with you. You talked about how you really came from that technical background. You're the idea guy, you solve big problems, you build these big, beautiful things, but you've also had to become an expert in culture and people and how do you get a group of people together to do something big and difficult. And there's an expression that I love called culture eats strategy for breakfast. We can
Yeah,
have the
by Peter
best.
Drucker. That's
Yeah,
Peter Drucker's phrase.
exactly, right? And it almost makes me want to cringe every time I hear it because that's certainly what happened with me, my teams, a lot of my endeavors, right? Is it wasn't that we didn't have great plans. We were making great choices. It was the culture that was slowing us down, or even making us fail. There's a reason why 95% of companies fail. So do you have any examples of that in your experience where culture was not working for you, it was actually working against you as you were trying to develop and lead these high performing teams?
Yeah, absolutely. All the three turnarounds, or even, pretty much every business that I've been hired to do something good with, had this problem. Why were they in trouble? They were in trouble because the culture and the strategy were not aligned.
Right.
A strategy is what you need to get done. Culture determines what you get done.
Ooh,
So if they're not aligned, if you're not aligned, it won't happen.
right.
And so, this was one of the first. I actually dedicate an entire chapter in my book. It's the longest chapter in my book on culture. And there's two parts to it. Number one, how do you foster the right behavior in a team? Because what is culture? Culture is a set of values, ideas, beliefs, and behaviors
Mhm.
exhibited by the employees of the company.
Right.
Okay. And so you first have to foster the right behavior, you know, and second, you have to foster the right leadership. And these go hand in hand.
Hmm.
So what I say is, the first thing I do in all of the companies that I was asked to turn around is I first raised awareness of why are we in this situation? Because awareness brings understanding. Understanding brings agreement. Agreement drives action.
Hmm. Right.
So if you can't bring the awareness, and the best story I have is this, when I was telling people that you're really late and we have a problem in the deliveries, nobody believed me. So I said, okay, how? So my marketing director, very bright lady, she told me, Sandeep, let's do this. Let's go and do a candid interview with each of our customers. And it won't be edited. We just ask them flat out, what do they think about us? So there was the CTO of a big telecom company who had invested in us. And I recorded this 10-minute interview with him and I showed it at my first town hall. And he said, guys, you're the smartest bunch of people I've ever met. But I want you to know because of my trust in you and the fact that you didn't deliver, I lost my bonus last year. I couldn't have said it better because after that, everybody got it. And then, so they would jump on planes and go and help customers because they said we let him down
Yeah.
when he trusted us.
Hmm.
So it was the way of bringing awareness and how serious it was because no amount of me talking to them had
Right.
the same impact as what this CTO said. The second thing I do is to say, hey, you need to, if I'm bringing awareness, what do we need to fix? I call that knowing your numbers. What are you trying to fix? And you have to have some metrics. You're trying to achieve those metrics and you make the entire team rally around those metrics.
Hmm.
The third thing you do is you kind of align roles and responsibilities to the major deliverables of the companies.
Hmm.
You need to be structured because there's a difference between a kindergarten soccer team and a professional soccer teams. Professional soccer teams play positions. They pass the ball. They know how to defend, right? Kindergarten soccer team, everyone's having fun, but the outcome is very, it's normally pretty chaotic. Everyone's having fun and the parents are coaching, the coach is coaching. It's just all over the place, right? It's not predictable.
Right.
So there are a couple of other things I try to do, and one of them is how do you engender a sense of urgency?
Hmm.
Okay, and I won't go into that, but it's in my book. And then Also, how do you grow your capability cube? This cube has three dimensions. One is called capacity, one is competence, and one is clarity of purpose. How do you grow this cube consistently? Because that makes you a more efficient company
Hmm.
when you have fewer people. The last two things are very interesting. I call it prune the yellow leaves. And then the last one is to validate and reinforce what you're doing is correct. Now, pruning the yellow leaves is a great story. Professor Willie Peterson at Columbia taught me this. He told a story about how he and his wife bought two potted plants, and they put it on each of their balconies. It was in New York City, overlooking, I think, Central Park, and they both got enough sun and both had water. But he found that his wife's plant was always green and his was getting yellow. And so he said he had to spy on what she was doing. And every morning she would go and take out the yellow leaves. And he never did that.
Hmm.
And the moral of the story was that the plant spends too much energy trying to revive the yellow leaves.
Exactly.
And then more leaves go yellow.
Hmm.
And this is the same in companies. There are a few misaligned individuals. We spend all our time trying to appease them. I don't think that's the right idea.
Right.
I think what happens is give them 3 months. If they can't align themselves with the betterment of the company, it's time to move on.
Yeah.
And uh, and then, of course, reinforcing and validating exactly what you're doing.
Hmm.
And to end the story, the five leadership qualities I look for are vision coupled with both conviction and perseverance. The second is leading by example.
Hmm.
You always have to be a leader that follows the Latin phrase primus inter pares, which means first among equals.
Yeah.
And then the next one is managerial courage. And this is really important. You have to be ready to take unpopular decisions for the betterment of the company, not for your friends. Because you got to basically come in every day to the office, leaving your friendship badge at the door.
Hmm.
And you handle things and say, it is what you know, not who you know.
Right.
Okay. And the fourth one is the clarity of communication.
Hmm.
And the last one is the curiosity to evolve. And you just have to find the gorilla in the room.
Love it. Sandeep, I have one more question for you. You have spent years cultivating this wisdom, and you've taken on this new challenge with Under, the startup in Austin. It's grown. Y'all are doing really exciting things. You've already had a lot of wins. What do you see is going to be necessary in the culture for 5 years down the road with this company, considering all the things that you've learned and the tools you deploy? What do you think your emphasis is going to be in shifting the culture, proactively building a culture that's going to work for the company 5 years down the road?
Yeah, I think there's two phases to this, right? So, what we do is we build radar technology
Mhm.
for safety in cars,
Mhm.
for automatic emergency braking, automatic cruise control, etc. So, the first thing we had to do, which is very unusual for a startup, is to build that automotive mindset and the safety culture.
Okay.
And you need to you have to get 7 certifications. And it's very difficult for a startup to get those. But the first transformation we've done internally, thanks to the fantastic employees, that we've made that transformation and we've got all the 7 certifications. So we're only a handful of companies in the world who's been able to do it by being a startup. Now, bigger companies can do it, obviously, because they have resources. This is very, very hard.
Hmm.
Okay? And that takes a particular process mindset, a quality mindset, and a safety mindset in everything we do.
Absolutely.
So we've done that. But you can't rest on your laurels. To your question, the next thing is to figure out how do we constantly stay ahead of our competition?
Right.
Okay, now innovation and process sometimes don't go together. And we have to learn how to master that.
Hmm.
right? We have to stay ahead. Today we are ahead. We are 2 or 3 years ahead of the competition. But how do we keep that lead
Mhm.
and not get mired down in this very, very rigorous process that we need to follow in order to maintain our safety certification?
Right. There's a
So
tension
that's
there.
going to be an interesting challenge, and we're working on that. I don't think we've solved it yet, but it's something that we have to solve. But as I said, the first thing is recognizing what you have to do.
Right.
And once you've recognized and understood, then you can make a plan.
Right. There are some healthy tensions within every company, right? Where we've got to balance different factors in order to be successful. And you're able to create that visibility for the team and the company to see those tensions and be aware that this is what we're grappling with, right?
That's right.
And
And yeah, and you have to guide. You have to guide as to what needs to be done, and then also listen to feedback
exactly.
because you can't do it in a vacuum.
Right, right. And sometimes those brilliant ideas, the tiny little shifts or distinctions come from the people who are closest to the product or service, who get that idea, right? Where you guide, you create a vision, and then all of a sudden someone comes up and says, I have an idea of how we can shift this a little bit and we can work with that tension and use it to our advantage.
Yeah, but the biggest challenge I found in a startup is a fantastic quote that I got from I learned about watching a podcast called by Founders by David Samra, where he talked about David Packard, the founder of Hewlett Packard.
Right?
So David Packard said most startups die from indigestion and not starvation. Because they try to do too much, and you can't do too much. You have to focus.
Right.
So if you keep that in mind and you parse out your work to have a healthy balance between innovation and process, right, and delivery, you can actually make it work.
I love that. I love that. Sandeep, thank you so much for being with us on the podcast. This was an awesome conversation with you. I would love to hear one last little nugget of advice from you for other people who are trying to build big, innovative things and solve big problems, who are leading in their field. Just one bit of advice that you would give to those leaders who are where you were 20 or 30 years ago, even.
Well, you know, uh, there's no particular thing that I can say because each of us is different, right? And all I can say is believe in yourself, do things you like, work with people you like, and always believe in the bright hope that the future brings.
I love it. You said you couldn't give advice. That was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thanks, Meg.